Hello and welcome to Makeup and Media Analysis, where I sit down, I do my makeup and I talk about a piece of media that I've consumed recently and have some critical thoughts on. I never claim to be a makeup artist, so let's just hope that the media analysis is better than the makeup. I'm talking about the 100 today, so you know what makeup I had to do. In 2014 I spent a lot of time in bed with then undiagnosed glandular fever, or mono to Americans. And during that time I developed chronic fatigue and an aversion to the outdoors, so I basically did quarantine before it was cool. And during that time I turned to telly, or whatever the CW's 100 was supposed to be. Almost a year after the 100 finale I decided to interrogate why the show's ending pissed me off so much. And I figured it out when I was listening to the Citadel Dropouts podcast. It was about the Game of Thrones finale. The hosts essentially concluded that the reason that the Game of Thrones finale just didn't work was that a lot of the time they were trying to reach this sort of emotion without having done any of the work. It was like an uncanny valley of moments that were meant to mean something. In fact, because absolutely no work had been put in to evoke the emotions the producers clearly wanted from us, a lot of the time when the 100 was tried to be tragic, it would just be farcical. If it wanted to be heartwarming, it would just be insincere. And when it wanted to subvert expectations, it was just, a heaping pile of absolute shit. Not only that, but it was a heaping pile of absolute shit that just slapped its fans in the face. Like, how dare you care about these characters? Don't you know we're subverting expectations over here on this terrible teenage drama? Before I start aggressively slagging the show off, please know that when it started, I loved the 100. I'm a CW veteran. I've done the Veronica Mars, I've done the Jane the Virgins, I've done the Gossip Girl, the original one, not the new shit that's just come out. However, even I am far too good for Supernatural. That was a hellhole of your own making, my friends. I know that dumb shows for teenage girls get a bad rep. I mean, who else in the world is hated more than teenage girls? Well, a lot of people, but they are very hated. After all, it's widely known that teenage girls are the stupidest people on earth. But the thing is, some of these CW shows, they have valuable things to say. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend uses all these ridiculous romantic tropes to interrogate mental health. Veronica Mars used the teen drama format to interrogate issues about classism, misogyny and rape culture. So within this context, the 100 could have done some really great things. So within this context, the 100 could have discussed really complex issues about colonialism and identity, while also giving us this fun romp about pretty people in peril. It could have done this.
97 years ago, a nuclear apocalypse killed everything on Earth, leaving the planet simmering in radiation. But fortunately, not everyone was on the ground. At the time, 12 space stations were in orbit and came together to form the Ark.
The 100 takes place 97 years after the nuclear apocalypse. The 100 timeline says the original nuclear apocalypse happened in 2149. No, the events of the show happened in 2149, with the apocalypse taking place in 2051. The timeline of the 100 that they have on the wiki is very funny to me because they've genuinely tried to map out the events with a show whose, grasp on time is less reliable than that of Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who. But back to the point. Humanity survives in a space station called the Ark, which is supposed to survive or keep humanity alive for another 4 generations until the Earth is survivable again. In the first episode, 100 underage prisoners get sent to the Earth because the Ark is running out of oxygen and they need to see if the Earth is a viable backup plan. The story revolves around the internal politics of the kids on the ground, the adults back up on the Ark, and the people that already live on the ground who survive the nuclear apocalypse. These characters are called Grounders because the names in this show are incredibly stupid. I don't have the time or energy to recount the whole plot to you because it doesn't make any sense. I might try and describe some certain scenes, so if you haven't watched the show you can just agree with everything I said, and if you have watched the show you can just relive some shared trauma with me. The first episode of the 100 we are introduced to this world in a very skillful and subtle way because Clark literally just tells us everything that has happened up until this point. If you're going to use voiceover in your show it needs to serve a narrative function. For example in Gossip Girl, the petty bitchy narrator that's just making fun of the way that all these girls treat each other. Or also Kristen Bell in Veronica Mars, when she uses her voiceover she's harking back to the first person noir PI stories that we're very used to. She's Vera Wachowski but she's in high school. Or in Jane the Virgin, the Latin lover narrator is just paying homage to the telenovelas in which the show takes inspiration from. The voiceover in the 100 is just lazy writing because it only serves as exposition. It doesn't bring anything unique to the series, it only exists so that whenever there's a previously on, we can quickly just play Clark's explanations of things and then jump right back into the story. Honestly, do you know what? Because Lex's makeup is so messy, it might actually be like the perfect makeup look for me. I think I should go out in the club looking like this and just like have all lesbians go fucking nuts for me. I think Nicola Shindler said it best in her 2002 lecture to the Royal Television Society's Hugh Weldon Memorial. Have you ever heard a more British name for an award ceremony? I think not. But anyway, Nicola Shindler said, "There are a lot of ways to tell a story, and in my opinion, a lot of ways shouldn't be used. I got my pet hate, which drives the writers I work with mad, but they have to do a lot to persuade me to change my mind. I can't bear voiceovers and flashbacks. Interestingly, when you just lift them out of a script, it's amazing how well the story works without them, with no rewrites. I think they're just often a crutch for the writer, and sometimes show lazy storytelling. I feel the same about voiceover. It's lazy. It's a visual medium, so don't have someone tell me what to think or what to watch. Show me." This expository tell, not show dialogue continues throughout the entirety of the pilot. For example, there's a scene where Clark is reunited with her best friend Wells, and she says, "They didn't arrest my father, they executed him." And then later on in the flashback you see that Wells was literally there when it happened, so you know. I think he knows they executed your dad, Clark. They only decided to include that line because they think the audience is stupid. But then we get to the ground and my favourite scene happens. Honestly, nothing screams 2014 like a teen drama using an Imagine Dragons song. It's not a radioactive song. That's just the name of the title. It's not going to give you cancer or anything. After this, all the kids go a bit feral. It's quite a quick, breakdown of order, Lord of the Flies style. A lot of people like following Bellamy because he's, hot and he has all these anti-authoritarian ideas about how the people should take back their power now that they're on the ground. Clark and Finn have to go and establish the season 2 plotline, and Octavia just takes her pants off. Well, her trousers, but it's American, so she takes her trousers off a lot. If she took her pants off, it would probably have a higher rating. Over here, I'm actually not angry with the way my eye makeup has turned out, because at the end of the day, Lex's eye makeup is actually this messy. So I think I'm just going to leave it there. I'm not going to put the bindi on, because the eye makeup is inspired by Vikings and things like that. I mean, I'm Danish, so I'm allowed to claim that. Whereas the bindi, it's very clear, one-to-one cultural appropriation. That is not something that me as a white woman should be wearing, in my personal opinion. In the year 100 premiered, Slate magazine argued that teens love the dystopian genre because the word dystopia comes from a Greek root that roughly translates as bad place. And what could be worse than high school? Actually, on the movie Divergent, Dana Stevens argued stories set in the world of teens often revolve around moments of having to choose, publicly and painfully, who you are, to identify yourself in an established social category. This being high school, the selection of prefix identities on offer is constructively narrow and closely policed by powerful malevolent forces. Any genuine self-discovery will reveal a flaw in the whole taxonomy, bringing down the system. We can certainly see her argument play out in the pilot of the 100. Clark finds herself fighting for popularity against Bellamy. This scenario in a natural high school would be completely inconsequential, but since it's a matter of life and death, suddenly the stakes are a bit higher. In 2013, Julia Eccleshare wrote for The Guardian. They offer young readers the chance to think about what kind of world they would create for themselves if they could forge everything again. She later continues, an apparently bleak world is reimagined and lit up by children who understand clearly what is worth saving as they step from childhood to adulthood. Frequently, family is let go while friendship or trust in others becomes the future foundation. And we can see Eccleshare's argument play out within the 100, Because on the Ark they have all these stupid rules, like all the class division, because they're just trying to survive. But when they get down to the ground, they suddenly realise that it's easier to survive if they work together. And actually, it's not just about survival, it's about living. Here's where the genres of both dystopia and post-apocalyptic fiction intersect. In her book, Post-Apocalyptic Fiction and Social Contract, Claire P. Curtis says the apocalyptic event creates a social contract thinker's state of nature. Such events, by their very character, understood to destroy functional governments, food distribution, organised medical care and the infrastructure on which we rely on for most of what we do. And once again, we see this argument play out in the 100. A lot of the first season is about where are they going to find food? How are they going to allocate that food? Bellamy says if you take your wristband off, then you can have some of this panther. It's all about these complex political questions being played out in a more childish scenario, i.e. because these characters are all literally children, it's just a high school drama, but it's about complex political analysis. The frustration I have with this show is because a lot of the earlier seasons seemed like they were trying to say something about the state of humanity, about the state of capitalism, quite frankly. What extremes will people go to? Will they end up having to kill or be killed? And is there another way? Is the only way to save the day by forging a brand new political system for the human race? What sort of ideas could this show come up? At the start of this video, I mentioned the Game of Thrones podcast, Citadel Dropouts. This podcast is hosted by American National Security correspondent Spencer Ackerman and award-winning journalist Laura Hudson. And essentially they give us a very political analysis of Game of Thrones, wherein they compare the politics that is happening in the show to modern day politics. So for example, they say when Daenerys wants to break the wheel, she's advocating this universe's version of socialism. And you know, I appreciate that kind of analysis of fiction. My academic career peaked when I got 100% on my AS politics paper, so yes, actually, it is that deep. On a more serious note, dystopia is a political genre. A genre that reimagines the way that society could work is always going to be political. Like, there's a reason that Fahrenheit 459, Fahrenheit 451, 1984, The Handmaid's Tale, these books are always referenced when there's a big political event going on. Because these texts articulate our fears about authoritarianism, misogyny, censorship. I just get so annoyed, like the early seasons of the 100 and the novels they're based on had a clear political message. And then the last two seasons happened. So, the 100 has a pretty formulaic list of teen drama characters. Cara E. Hempel described the role of a YA heroine as thus: the settings of these series have a lot to do with a focus on action, taking place in the future of what was once the United States. The novels generally follow a young heroine who uncovers the injustice of our society and fights it, whether through her own determination, as part of someone else's plan, or through some twist of fate. This common setup means the story is usually one of struggle that ends in liberation, both for the protagonist and for society as a whole. I think this description actually really portrays Clark. In the first few seasons at least. We first meet Clark doing a big drawing on the floor of her cell, so we know that she's, you know, artistic and has feelings. Side note, this is one of those traits where Clark very rarely draws. She maybe does it twice or 3 times in the first few seasons. Every single fanfic, she is drawing. Every single one. It's like how in every single Belloc fanfic he calls her princess, when like he only ever does it about twice. And like Finn called her at first. Can you see I'm wearing a Belloc shirt, by the way? And you probably can't tell. I'm trying to be fairly neutral by doing the Lexa makeup while wearing a Belloc shirt, because I know this is a controversial issue within the fandom. Anyway, back to Clark. She is the daughter of Abby, who is the chief medical officer on the Ark. The Ark seems to be a world where the most privileged get jobs because, assumably, they have access to higher education while other people don't. So jobs like engineer or doctor are very highly favoured, and that means that they have all the social graces of being upper class, whereas janitors get nothing, essentially. Prior to her arrest, it doesn't seem like Clark has any sort of job. She just sort of sits around playing see-through sci-fi chess or watching old football games. Clark's main trait is that she is very loyal and that she's a good leader. She will know what to do when things go south. Of course, because Jason Rothenberg is writing this, instead of being shown Clark's good leader, we just get told it. You know, the first time we see her, Abby says, "You're a good leader, you'll know what to do and how to help all the other kids." This scene is kind of interesting because it establishes that Abby is lying to her daughter and that she's like willing to sacrifice her for the greater good. The appeal of Clark is that she quickly shakes off the princess label everyone else gives her. It's pretty standard YA feminism. Look at this white girl, this rich white girl, who is having people underestimate her. What oppression! She needs to break through these shackles immediately. Clark is also thin enough to even be allowed into an American TV show, but she is also curvy enough to be considered a body positive icon. She has big tits. I mean, that's exactly what the body positivity movement needs. When discrimination against fat black women and fat non-gender conforming people is at an all-time high, what we need is a thin, skinny woman with big tits to let us all know, actually, you shouldn't hate your bodies as much as you usually do. In the first 4 seasons of the show, Clark's narrative is pretty compelling. When we first meet her, she seems naive. She's posh, she doesn't know what she's getting into. She's probably never raised her hand to do anything remotely hard-working before. And then we get to episode 3. The character of Atom, who I thought was called Adam, because Americans can't say it differently. They just say Adam, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, what is this man's name? Not the point. Anyway, Bellamy finds Atom snogging his sister Octavia. And he's like, no, absolutely not having that, and basically strings him up and, like, leaves him to die, which is weird. He doesn't die. Instead, he gets caught in acid rain, and he's left there, like, asking to be killed. And Bellamy, who until this point has been the big man, has been the, I'll make the tough decisions. He can't do it. He can't actually hurt someone. And then Clark comes by, she slowly takes the hand from his knife. No, she slowly takes the knife from his hand. And she ends it for him. Well, she sings him a very nice song before she kills Atom. I mean, literally. This show, it's like, look at all that sexual tension between these two people that are killing a teenage boy. Clark then quickly establishes herself as a competent leader. She's always doing it for her people. But sadly, doing it for her people means that there is a people that she has to fight against. And unfortunately, this weird combination of being very loyal to your people and also being smart and pragmatic means that she commits a lot of genocide. Yeah, lots of genocide. And it's justifiable because it's our people versus their people. And a lot of this our people versus their people has very colonialist undertones, which I'll discuss later on in this video. Over the first 3 seasons, Clark develops because she always has to sacrifice lots of people in order to save her own. But by season 4, she ends up having to actually sacrifice herself for once. She ends up surviving and then becomes entangled in this world of violence and factionalism once again. And it kind of sucks because a better writer would have ended her storyline in season 4. You know, it's this person that has killed so many people learns their humanity again by sacrificing themselves. In fact, a better writer has already done that. Have you ever seen the season 1 finale of Doctor Who? Don't tell me you skipped 9. Just don't do that. Just leave, collect some brain cells, and watch the 9th Doctor era because it's amazing. Not the point. Point is, at the end of his era, we learned that he has, you know, completely destroyed the man he was in the classic series because he has had to commit genocide by killing the Time Lords and the Daleks. It was the only way to stop the Time War. But when we hit the season 1 finale, he is offered the choice again. Do you just let everyone die? Or could you actually sacrifice yourself to save someone you love? And then we get the amazingly cheesy, I think you need a doctor kiss. Honestly, it gets me every time. This video isn't about Doctor Who, but anyway, people that don't rate the chemistry between Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper, like, I need to have words with you, because at the end of the day, the way that he says Rose in his accent,
But this is wrong! can't control life and death.
But I can. The sun and the moon. The day and night. Why do they hurt?
The power's gonna kill you and it's my fault.
I can see everything. All that is. All that was. All that ever could be.
That's what I see. All the time. And doesn't it drive you mad?
My head
Come here.
is killing me.
I think you need a doctor.
If Jason Rothenberg had even a fifth of Russell T Davies' skills, then he would have probably ended the show in season 4. He would have had Clark sacrifice herself and survive, but then somehow get reunited with Bellamy, and they would finally kiss. But that's not what happens. The male lead is called Bellamy. He's quite a typical CW lead in that he's, a sexy and tortured bad boy. He's the Damon to Clark's Elena, or the Logan to Clark's Veronica, or I don't know, the Jughead to Bethy. I never watched I never watched Riverdale. Like, there's 2 CW shows that even I am too good for, and that is Riverdale and Supernatural. The 100 AU, where everything the same except Lexa is wearing Fenty. I think it would be even better, to be honest. Okay. Bellamy was a janitor on the Ark. He spent his life caring for his secret sister. He manages to become a member of the 100 because he's offered a deal. You can go on the dropship and protect your sister if you shoot the Chancellor. So he's like dangerous, but he's also like sensitive inside. I don't think I'm going to add lashes to this, because at the end of the day I'm a warrior princess. Warrior queens don't take shit from nobody, especially not fake lashes. Bellamy is also the group leader. He's the heart. If you can see on my shirt, he's the heart to Clark's head. When they get together, it's a perfect union. Bellamy's arc is quite typical of like CW bad boys, but in a way that is quite interesting. Often CW bad boys, their development or their redemption arcs are often in a way that breaks down masculinity. Like, they actually learn they can be kind and sensitive, and they don't have to be always trying to fight everyone. And Bellamy's humanity is defined through his relationships towards women, his protectiveness towards Octavia, and his deep, yearning, just meaningful friendship with Clark. Throughout the series, Bellamy learns to be less violent and aggressive. He learns that he can't control Octavia or her sexuality. He goes from being this ambiguous leader to being this, dad, this tired dad with a goatee. In the iconic season 2 finale, Bellamy decides, actually, this is how we're going to do it. I am the heart of this story because I believe more about the human cost of a battle. But unfortunately, they end up having to choose the head in which to go with. Bellamy always reminds us of the human cost of any battle. Even when Clark has to be pragmatic for the sake of their people, it's always Bellamy that goes, what about the kids? There are kids in there. But again, because the show went on for too long and they eventually just didn't know what to do with Bellamy, like by season 7 he's just sort of tired. They don't know what to do. They just bat him around the plot like a tennis ball. Like, does he actually ever do anything between season 5 and season 6 apart from stand up to Octavia once? No, he doesn't. Now let's talk about Octavia, who is Bellamy's little sister. She was brought up under the floor because the Ark has a one-child-only policy. And as a result of this, she's quite unhinged. She likes to use violence as a form of self-expression. She's also very creepily sexualised. Like, from the moment we meet her, it's quite clearly established. This is a 16-year-old girl who has never met anyone she is not related to before. And the first episode is basically dedicated to her taking her trousers off and just everybody staring at her pants. Which is good and normal. And her relationship with Lincoln is just insane. It's so weird. Like, he is an adult man who is stalking this teenage girl. And but it's okay because he does charcoal drawings of her. Like, he's sensitive and shit. Also, it's okay because she's clearly not 16, she's clearly 25, and he's also 25. So you're just like, oh, that's just a normal couple you see on a night out. And not a teenager being stalked by an adult man. Octavia eventually gets to be a leader. When she does, she's all about violence and fear. She actually starts a cult. Basically, everyone calls her Blood Rainer. They have this made-up language in the 100 universe called Trig. And so they're like, oh, do you know what sounds sci-fi? Spanish. So if you speak even basic Spanish, you will know that Rainer just means queen. So in this apparently incredibly sci-fi futuristic language, they have decided to just call her Blood Queen. Like, how much did somebody get paid to make up this fake language? Because I want to have words. Octavia basically gets redeemed from her cult phase when she becomes the elder sister to Hope Dioza. So basically, she goes from overly sexualised teenager to cult leader, well, to assassin to cult leader, and then into Bellamy. It's quite an arc, isn't it? Then we have Abby, Clark's mum. She's a surgeon and a member of the council. The most interesting thing that Abby ever does is she has Clark's dad executed because he wanted to tell the general public that oxygen was running out on the Ark. After that, she sort of has this lovers enemies thing going on with Marcus Kane, where they just multiple times just decide, do you know what, I'm feeling romantic today, you can be Chancellor. No babe, I'm feeling romantic today, you can be Chancellor. Like, there's, like, I'm sorry, did the democratic process just get lost in your flirtation? Okay. The writers really don't know what to do with Abby. Like, at one point they gave her a drug addiction for no reason, and then they kill her off because they've just fully run out of ideas. It's irritating. Like, she was a really interesting character early on because of her moral ambiguity, but by the end she's just like another character that does things. Some of them are bad. Sometimes she cares. Yeah. She was so interesting at the start. She was like, you know, sometimes you have to make bad decisions. Sometimes you have to kill people you love in order to save everyone. Next we have John Murphy. He's like the villain of season 1. He goes on like a kind of serial killer spree. But then he ends up in the desert trying to be Moses. And he gets a cute girlfriend. She's called Amori. And they're like, oh, we're both outcasts, so we're gonna make each other better people. And then in season 6 he's offered like the most selfish thing he could do. He's offered immortality if he joins the baddies. He's like, Amori and I can be immortal. I don't care after to sell out my friends. But at the end of the day he gives that up in the ultimate selfless act. Yeah, again, after his redemption arc, Murphy's character was kind of always stuck between doing good and doing bad. But at the end of the day you kind of always knew he was going to choose the members of the 100 after his redemption arc. It just didn't really get that interesting because he was genuinely a threat in season 1. He killed multiple people. He's never a threat after that. So you're almost comforted knowing that he's not going to betray the 100 again. It sucks. He's an enjoyable character. For the first 2 seasons of the show, Raven was my favourite character. She's this spunky mechanic who manages to get to the ground and help the 100 because she rebuilds this 100-year-old space pod all by herself. Raven is just hilarious to me because she's one of those utilitarian characters where in season 1 she's a very clearly defined skill set, and then by season 7 she's working on alien spaceships that were made over 100 years before she was born, and she just masters them like that. Like, they're just like, oh, we need someone to do something technical. Raven! Raven has absolutely terrible luck with men. They either die, disappear, or die again. Any time she has sex, you have to like just get your watch out and then be like, okay. And he dies in, 15 minutes after they had sex. That's a record. God, I just realised that if you include Bellamy in the list of people that Raven has sex with, then every man that she ever has sex with dies. That is depressing. That's pretty much the core cast of the 7 seasons. I'm going to include a separate section about the Grounders once I talk about like the implications, the political implications that the Grounders pose to the narrative of the story. The 100 premiered in 2014, which was the same year as Mockingjay Part 1, the film, came out. And the 100 definitely came out in a sea of Hunger Games knockoffs. The YA dystopian genre was having a boom. However, not many people know this, but the TV series is actually based on some books. Before they even came out, Jason Rothenberg just loved the concept and decided to buy up all the rights. Unfortunately, this means that most people don't know that Kass Morgan, who wrote the original books, might actually be a better writer than Jason Rothenberg. And the reason she might be a better writer? Well, it's because she knows how to effectively use tropes. Now, I haven't read the books, okay? This video alone has nearly killed me. I'm not dedicating any more of my life to this franchise. However, there is a plot summary on Wikipedia, and it basically says the whole of season 1 is about a love triangle between Clark and her lovely best friend Wells and the new bad boy Bellamy. Clark and Wells are rich, Bellamy is not, therefore we got the star-crossed lovers element there. The books revolve around this coming-of-age storyline in which Clark tries to make the world a better place once they're rebuilding society on the ground. It's all pretty standard YA stuff. The show is not like this. In the incredibly bad voiceover that starts the series off, Clark informs us that the Ark was made up of 13 colonies. No, wait, not colonies. Stations. That were already in space by the time the Earth was destroyed in a nuclear war. Side note, in the book, the Ark is literally just called the Colony. According to the 100 Wiki, the Earth was destroyed on the 10th of May 2051. 2052. The point is, the apocalypse that caused all of the actions that happen in the show takes place only 30 years in the future from when I'm speaking now. However, the world of the 100 seems to have lost all modern context in only 97 years. For example, there is obvious Christian imagery in naming the ship that saves the human race the Ark, but the people on board the Ark are not Christian. There is some vague religious elements of the whole may we meet again aspect, but it's not Christianity. So, what happened? The politics of the Ark just don't make any sense either. Everyone's American, even though, like, not even all the actors are American. These 13 stations were meant to have represented the whole world. And yet everybody has an American accent, but they seem to have a German legal system. So if we think about it, in only 97 years, humanity has become monolingual, irreligious, and American-centric, but with a German democratic system. The fact that culture has evolved to become like this suggests there was some sort of violent power struggle in which all other cultures were erased. That would be an interesting storyline to explore. I mean, it has clear parallels to what's happening in the modern day. But no, instead we're basically told that, you know, all of these clear examples of systemic erasure, they just sort of happened. There's no political analysis of it whatsoever. It's just like, we're American, so we've decided everybody on this arc would be American. That makes sense, right? Yeah! To quote Marxist critic Terry Eagleton, genuine equality means not treating everyone the same, but attending equally to everyone's different needs. The arc existing in an American-centric universe implies that they exist in an American exceptionalist universe. Were all other cultures just told, you will achieve self-determination if you become an American clone? To the point where they lost their language, they lost their religion, they lost their accents? But the show never discusses the clearer analogies they could have done in regards to American imperialism. Like, the only struggle left is class struggle. And it just sort of makes you think, so this show was written by that type of white man who will shout over black women and tell them the only struggle is class struggle. Like, yeah, that is a struggle. It does affect people from different backgrounds differently because oppression is a multi-layered thing. But that would require the writers of this show to have, I don't know, a singular brain cell. This is the part of the video where the bad writing starts to become, like, genuinely offensive. Like, let's recap the plot so far. Clark is somebody with lots of technology who comes down to a place that was once the continental United States, sees a lot of people with less technology and goes, let's bomb them. I mean, it's slightly more complex than that. They seem to throw things at each other a bit, but like, at the end of the day, Clark is a white woman who comes down to this land where the first grounder she meets is a person of colour. And she says, you're doing this all wrong. I have technology. I'm smarter than you. This is how we're going to rebuild society, because you're clearly doing it wrong. You don't have to be Edward Said to see the analogy. Like, the grounders are very clearly Native Americans. If we wanted a more one-on-one, like, parallel with colonialist history, then we would have had a parallel with Australia, wherein the original white settlers in Australia were actually criminals who were sentenced to penal commutes, which is essentially they were British people, but they were poor, so they were like, we're going to send you to the other side of the world on a dirty boat. So basically the argument was, it doesn't matter if you die on the way, it doesn't matter if you die when you're there, you're criminals and so you're surplus. Like you see how close how that analogy would be, but that would require, again, these Americans thinking that anywhere else in the world exists other than America. Your lead actors are Australian! My point being, we have to discuss that the lazy writing of the show becomes genuinely offensive when you think of the fact that the Grounders are the show's analogy for Native Americans. When you write a fictional community, you have to be wary of analogies that pop up, accidental or not. And even if, say, for some goddamn reason you weren't aware of these analogies, by the time season 1 had come out, there were already like 100 think pieces telling you, hey, these are the implications of this analogy. Are you going to consider that in your writing? There's actually been an essay written on this subject. In 2020, Nicholas Rickards published New Places, New Races, Neocolonialism and Post-Structural Racism, the Young Adult Dystopian series, The 100. Can I just say, I was amazed that an academic essay was written on this TV series. I know this is a form of an academic essay, but like, this guy is peer-reviewed and I got a 2-1. So, Rickards writes, by reimagining the Earth as terra incognita, first season of The 100 suggests audience members should understand identity through colonizer or colonized subject positions. As a result of this, the series imagines a dystopic future where settler colonialism is under threat. Rickards then goes on to discuss the first interaction the Sky People have with the Grounders. A group of the 100 search their lost comrade and they stumble across the remains of what appears to be a pre-Homo, ape-like skeletal structure. The group exchange questions of, who are they? For, what are they? Heavily suggesting to the audience that what are most likely humans are only human-like. Even more offensively is the idea that this whole community, the Grounder community, was essentially forged by one white woman, which they decided in this backdoor pilot to a prequel series I'm never going to watch. Essentially what was discovered was that the language that the Grounders speak was formed all by one singular white woman. Because that is how language works. It is formed by one person, everyone just picks it up. Like, I'm just thinking of her sitting down and painstakingly trying to conjugate out all the verbs. Because, you know, half it's based on Spanish, and they are not easy verbs to conjugate out. I decided to split the Grounders into a separate section because a lot of them don't appear until later on in the series, and I wanted this video to be kind of understandable for people that haven't seen the show. First Grounder we have is Lincoln. You may have remembered me talking about him earlier. You know, the guy that stalks Octavia, basically kidnaps her. But then they fall in love and he's the first Grounder to get humanised because he likes to do charcoal drawings. Which is, you know, he stalked a child. But nobody cares, it's because it's fine, it's Ricky Whittler's hot. Unfortunately, Lincoln is pretty quickly just used as a pawn to further Octavia's storyline, rather than having like an internal world of his own. Next we have Indra. Indra is this older woman from Tree Crew who basically teaches Octavia how to fight. She has the sort of alliance of Cain. And she has a daughter that she has arguments with sometimes. Again, she really doesn't get that much character development. Like, you do get to see her become slightly more kind rather than so violent and aggressive, but that's basically it. Again, these Grounder characters rarely have particularly complex internal worlds. And if you're starting to see potentially racist tropes, oh, don't worry, it gets so much worse. Now we got to talk about Lexa, my girl, my makeup inspiration. She is the commander. She is the first to unite the 12 clans. 12 again. 12 clans, 12 colonies, 12 stations. Wonder if this show is trying to say something about America. She's a fighting queen because she was born with this like magic blood, which means she can accept a microchip in the back of her head. That means that she can command everybody. However, in order to get this microchip implanted in the back of her head, she was like a child soldier. She had to kill all the other children with the same blood as her in order to win. Yeah, horrible, very sad backstory, poor Lexa. Lexa is also a lesbian who has a very brief relationship with Clark. She's kind of controversial in the fan base because obviously by the time she showed up, most people would have did Bellark. So any opportunity to have a go at her, for example, at one point she's like, oh, I'm going to betray the 100 so I can save my own people. And everyone was like, that's completely unacceptable. And I'm just like, it's the 100, everyone's broken the Geneva Convention, leave Lexa alone. Echo is the longest running Grounder character in the show. She's also quite controversial because, you know, she and Bellamy have the least chemistry of any couple in the show. And like, there are some bad couples on this show. Echo is from Asgeda, which is Ice Nation, not Tree Nation, which is where Lexa and most of the Grounder characters come from. She's a spy, she tries to kill the main gang quite a bit. At the end of season 4 they sort of made up and she ends up hanging out with them in space and going out with Bellamy, and then after that she's like, oh, I've learnt the error of my ways and I'm in love with Bellamy, I'm not going to kill everyone now. And then in season 7 she goes on like a massive killing spree and then there are absolute, you know, repercussions for it. And everyone was thinking, hey, they did this earlier in the season where a unsuitable love interest went on a massive killing spree, showing that they were unsuitable for, you know, a member of Bellark. And then that character had repercussions. That character had to die. Didn't happen in season 7. They didn't really care about good storytelling by that point. I'm briefly going to touch on Rowan and Luna because they're fan favourites. Neither of them are actually there for that long. They're both quite hot and unhinged. I mean, Luna more so, because Rowan is like, oh, I have mummy issues, look at my abs. And Luna's like, well, everyone I love died, so I'm going to kill the entire human race. So, you know, there's different levels of unhinged. It was, I mean, honestly, Luna's decision to suddenly just kill the whole human race made absolutely no sense. She was like this lovely hippie that everyone just went to for help, who refused to commit any acts of violence. But it is also established that she killed a lot of other children in the killing children match that happens before someone becomes commander, so I don't know. In Nicholas Rickard's essay, he argues race is not simply an ideological construction. Rather, it is a multifaceted, omnipresent category that informs and is informed by historical processes and political struggles. Rickards then discusses Michael Omi and Harold Winant's theory of race formation, or the process by which the human body is codified and categorised through social structures and cultural representations. But like I said, the 100 is like, nah, we're going to ignore race. Everyone just speaks English. Racism doesn't exist anymore. You might think I'm being really hard on the Americans, and like, yeah. I do hate the Americans, but guess what? I also hate the British. Like, I'd say that Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, like, I'd say I hate Boris Johnson more than I hate Joe Biden. But that depends how much Joe Biden decides to bomb Syria. Well, also bombing Palestine. And Yemen. And everywhere, really. This, like, post-racialism is to the point of it being ridiculous. For example, in the 6th season, we meet these characters who can hop between bodies, right? All of these original characters that can hop between bodies are all white people. And they often hop into the body of, like, for example, a white woman will hop into the body of a black woman. And it's like, so there's no difference? She doesn't even have to learn how to do her hair differently? Like, it's Get Out, but by lazy writers. But of course, it's important to note the difference between the world of a show and the world that we live in. However, I'd argue that 100 is cognizant of its racial allegories. Most of Grounder's characters are played by people of colour. These castings are, despite Rickard's noting, the blueprint for the project in the series not so much to reproduce race and colonialism with on-the-nose stereotypes, casting all Aboriginal or black actors as Grounders, and all white actors as Sky people would be too racist, if not indecorous. That established, let's talk about how whenever Jason Rothenberg wants to shock you, he's going to kill the character of colour. I think it's worth saying, this section is going to include some probably quite triggering violence, so if you don't want to hear it, I'll leave a timecode up for when it ends. Okay, so let's talk about the death of Wells. So Jason Rothenberg goes, I need to establish the stakes. I need to have a shocking death. So he kills off the one black main character there is, and this character is killed by a white girl, and in the scene in which she brutally murders him, the camera is focused on her and how she's so upset about it, while his eyes turn grey, like, out of focus. it's so disrespectful. And it's so violent. Like, this is a show made for teenagers. This isn't Game of Thrones. When I introduced Raven earlier, I said that originally she's one of my favourite characters. But boy, did she get controversial by the end of the series. I think I'll just read out some of the things that Raven goes through during the series. 1. She is shot by Murphy during a serial killer phase. 2. In order to have his bullet removed, she has to undergo surgery without anaesthetic, and don't worry, the show makes sure you hear her screams. 3. She watches Clark kill her boyfriend Finn after Finn cheated on her with Clark. 4. She gets her bone marrow forcibly extracted at Mount Weather. More screaming. 5. She takes the Ally pill so she can no longer feel pain. Ally forces her to slash her wrist and make her smash her head against a metal bed frame until once again she's again screaming. 6. The gang manages to free her from Ally by subjecting her to multiple electric shocks. 7. They kill her dad. It may be the one you won't see from the 100. It's implied that Sinclair tells Raven he's her dad before he dies to protect her. 8. Raven starts to suffer from hallucinations and seizures because Ally is still in her head, so she once again has to fix her brain by defibrillating herself. 9. She is once again tortured via electrocution by her mother figure, Abby Griffin. 10. She gets a nice new boyfriend that doesn't choose on her Clark and then commit genocide, but then he immediately dies. Like, literally 2 minutes after they have sex. 11. She has to kill several people trying to fix a nuclear reactor and then kills people again so she can save her friends and feels like her soul has been cracked. Raven is the most major character in the show, but is played by a woman of colour. So the way that Jason Rothenberg decides to treat her with absolute complete disdain and decides to constantly subject her to violence after violence, it says a lot about his post-racial world, doesn't it? Lincoln is the first ground character we meet. Bellamy captures him and tortures him, but like, actually it's all good because Ricky Whittle has some really nice abs. Then Octavia gets injured and Lincoln picks her up and takes her to safety in his cave after he's been stalking her. She's 16. Nicholas Rickards argues that Octavia and Lincoln's relationship is a metaphorical rape fantasy. He states that iconography of the Grounders worked to fit the bill with a demeaning historical tradition of colonialist imagery. He says Grounders are stoic sentinels, represented as stealthy, animalistic stalkers who remain voiceless. In scenes where they do speak, they have very little dialogue, if any at all, existing mostly as physical subjects without agency. Rickards also focuses on a sexy torture scene. He writes, Lincoln remains silent while being repeatedly whipped by Bellamy in what could be conceived of as a homoerotic, sadomasochistic torture for the purpose of re-establishing masculine and patriarchal authority over the other. He then says that because Lincoln is racially ambiguous but still a dark body, the episode develops a eerie reminder of the homoerotic fascination with and castration of the black male phallus. I just got reminded of why I don't want to do a master's. Like, you know, Nicholas Rickards probably has a point here. But at the end of the day, I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of all literature being, you know, sex, death and white supremacy. Like, you ever read a story? You ever read a story that's just about a man walking down a pavement and he looks at the cracks in the pavement? Well, an English literature professor is going to jump out of a bush and tell you the Freudian implications of that. Yes, the bush is Freudian too. This man, and it is always a man, will never talk about why he's in the bush, waiting and staring at you. He just wants to talk to you about our good old friend Sigmund Freud. This man just wants to remind everyone of the golden rule. All literature is sex, death, and white supremacy. On that note, let's talk about the complicated racial dynamics of Octavia and Lincoln's relationship. Rickards argues that on the arc, Octavia embodies Victorian femininity because she is a white virgin, but when she hits the ground, Octavia is inundated by jungle fever. He then goes on about the semiotic meaning and imagery of Lincoln penetrating Octavia with a dagger. We already had one dick joke in this script, so it's time to move on. The point Rickards is making is that Octavia is symbolically raped and that this scene is an example of troubling racial dynamics that the show leans into. Lincoln is the complete embodiment of the racialized sexual threat, the mythical black rapist and the savage Native American. In season 1, Lincoln's character essentially unites the Grounders and the Sky People. He's a pretty classic noble savage. In season 2, we learn he's been kidnapped and I shit you not, turned into like a cannibalistic monster. He's the only black male lead we have in season 2. I'm sure Daniel Defoe would be happy to know the racist tropes that he invented like in the 1700s are still in use today. Lincoln gets rehumanised and becomes a permanent diplomat between the Sky People and the Grounders. Then season 3 happens. And Jason Rothenberg has one black man on the cast when he wants yet another shock death. The optics of Lincoln's death are absolutely disgusting for so many reasons. First, he's killed by Pike, who is a sort of populist leader that advocates a sort of police state wherein the Grounders are violently policed because they're apparently an enemy of the Sky People. Pike is played by a dark-skinned black actor, so the show probably thought, hey, we can ignore the parallels between Lincoln's death and current-day racist policing. In the scene itself, Lincoln is made to kneel before he is shot in the head. And all of this is overseen by Octavia. We're focused on her emotions during the scene, of course. Yes, another black man is killed to further a white woman's character development. How could you possibly have thought it was a good idea to have a black man dying on his knees like that? Like, the symbol of a black man on his knees, it didn't start with Marcus Rashford. Famously, Martin Luther King took the knee at Selma. It was often used in anti-slavery propaganda. Essentially, abolitionists would use the image of a black man on his knees to say, hey, he isn't this all-powerful, incredibly violent creature that, you know, this rhetoric that was used to justify slavery. So it's a fucking insult when this show decides to violently kill a black man while he is in a position that is widely associated with black non-violent resistance. Now let's talk about Bellamy. I'm specifically stating here how I think that Bob Morley's race affected his later character development on the show. I don't know if Bellamy's race is specified in the books. I know that he and Wells are meant to be half-brothers, and if Wells is black in the books, it might mean that Bellamy is mixed race. Because all I know about him is that in the books he has blue eyes, so it might be like a Jesse Williams situation. I don't think they wrote Bellamy with an actor of colour in mind. I say this because in the first season there is an episode in which there are flashbacks and there is a young Bellamy who is played by a white kid. This kid looks nothing like Bob Morley. Bob Morley doesn't pass as white, he's quite clearly mixed race. The only similarity the two of them have is freckles. I don't see how that casting decision could have been made for any other reason that they were going to cast a white guy, but Bob Morley just happened to be very good in the role. Bellamy never needed to die, but Jason Rothenberg will love to see a man of colour bleeding. To illustrate my point, I'm going to compare the deaths of men of colour in the show and the deaths of white men in the show. First, Lincoln versus Finn. Clark embraces Finn as she stabs him. It's a romantic sacrifice. We don't even actually see any of his blood, his head just slumps down. Lincoln gets shot in the head and there's like a massive blood cloud after it happens. We then see him falling into muddy water. Like the level of disrespect, you know? When Marcus dies, it's also intensely romantic. Because of the ridiculous body swapper storyline, he has been left in the body of this young man and he's like, this is unethical, I want to stop this. So he decides to sacrifice himself. The final scene we have, he returns to the face of his original actor. And it's him and Abby over this glass, having this intense eye contact, remembering everything they've ever done for each other and how much they love each other, but knowing. He does get thrown out of an airlock, but that's like a 30-second whiz away. Bellamy, who is the male lead of the show, gets shot by the woman he loves over a notebook. She then doesn't even then pick up that notebook. And then we have to have that final shot of just him lying in his own blood thinking, shit, that was really horrible how the woman I just love killed me. How the woman I love just killed me. They frame it as this inevitability thing. Bellamy had to die. He absolutely did not have to die. And they all we need that final shot of Bob Morley struggling to breathe as he bleeds out. We need to make sure the audience know that Bellamy suffered in a completely pointless death. I'm sorry my makeup suddenly got really bad in the second half of it, it's all gone into my pores and everything. I had to take a break midway through to watch Bake Off. And honestly, number one, I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix it when it all just goes into my pores. I put more makeup on top and it just doesn't seem to help that much. Also, I don't even know if Bake Off's worth it. I have to spend time with my family in order to watch Bake Off, and they're just as we have just discussed, the 100 apparently exists in a post-racial world. It's a world where all genders and sexualities are all completely equal. Or so it says. And I guess this equality is meant to be a result of the apocalypse. You know, it's the same sort of thing. People said, oh, Thanos is right. There's too many people. If we just kill half of them, equality will exist. And it's not capitalism that is causing social inequality. No. Too many people. But even in this supposedly equal world, the show clearly shows biases against some forms of representation, considering the fact that there are no trans people in this universe, and there are no fat characters. And I know what you're saying if you're an idiot. Because, you know, a lot of people are idiots. You're probably saying something ridiculous, like, of course there are no fat people. There are no fat people. Fat people are an aberration. They're disgusting. They are an example of people eating too much fast food. Actually, we should have a world like a post-nuclear apocalypse, where we're all fed rations every day to make sure we keep our population fit and healthy and thin and not fit and, no, it's not fit, sorry, thin and thin, not fit and healthy, just thin. And you're probably also thinking, oh, trans people won't exist in this world because trans people are this modern, you know, ideological construction. And they can't, it's not like they have hormone replacement in the post-apocalypse, oh my god. Well, okay, so, here are your options. You can either sit down, shut the fuck up, and learn. No, those are your only options. You can just sit down, shut the fuck up and learn. It's that simple, really. Number one, fatness is not as simple as, oh, you eat more food, you become fat. That's not how metabolism has been proven to work. That's not scientific, it's just bigotry. And also, people on the ground are not scarce of resources. The people in Mount Weather have chocolate cake. They have the resources to make and manufacture chocolate, make and manufacture chocolate cake. And you think, oh, they're eating all these massive banquets, but they're all still stick thin. Yeah, that makes sense. Also, people on the ground have access to loads of resources. They can kill and eat animals whenever they like, and they have all these trees that have fruit on them, etc, etc. So, like, why are there no fat people? Number one, because Jason Rothenberg is terrible at world building, and also because he didn't consider that fat people would exist in this world. I doubt he cares about representation for fat people. But to be honest, I also think he didn't consider that the implications of in 100 years all racism, sexism and homophobia will be completely erased is an insane proposition. Because when casting this show, they prioritised pretty people. I use air quotes there because, you know, idiots, stupid people, they think that pretty people have to be thin. You're only attractive if you're that wide. You're only attractive if I can see every single bone in your spine. Okay, maybe it's rude to say that, you know, fat phobes are stupid, but at the end of the day, fat phobes are stupid. In her book Happy Fat, Sophie Hagen actually discusses the idea of fat people being completely erased from this world. It's called symbolic erasure. I actually reused the whole quote in my last video on Drag Race, if you want to go and check that out. But essentially what she said is that when you're erasing fat people, it's a form of symbolic annihilation. And it's essentially saying that fat people don't matter, and by not having them on screen, by telling people that the only version of a fat person you're ever going to see on screen is going to be that overweight cousin who is always the bridesmaid, never the bride, and everybody always considers fatness to be like the most aberrant form of humanity possible. It makes sure that nobody that is, you know, anybody that isn't a cis, white, straight man, like, they feel worse about themselves. So by erasing fat characters, by erasing trans characters, it's a way of saying that, essentially, especially in this universe, by erasing people's obvious identities, it's by saying that these identities aren't normal and natural. Because this is humanity stripped back to its bare minimum. And you're saying if humanity was suddenly stripped back to its bare minimum, then fat people and trans people would cease to exist. Which is not true, because we've existed since the, you know, fat people, trans people, they've existed since the dawn of time. And if there's a nuclear apocalypse, they're going to exist after a nuclear apocalypse. And don't get it twisted, I don't want to see a fat trans character written by a skinny cis guy just for, like, the idea of token representation. I'm just saying, I think that it needs to be critically analysed why you would think that these identities would be erased. It starts to kind of sound like you're just like, actually, that is what humanity is. Humanity is something that exists without these marginalised groups. Since we're discussing what's missing in a seemingly equal world, then let's talk about the role of women. Women appear to be equal. We have the same jobs, the same opportunities. But that's not what equality is. Like, that's the argument that says, oh, if there's women in STEM, then sexism will be over. If women's equality actually existed in this world, then there would be quite some cultural assumptions that are rooted in patriarchy that would have been questioned. Like, why do all women take their husband's names when they get married? And why are all the single mothers portrayed so negatively? Bellamy's mother's a sex worker, Raven's mother's an alcoholic. I mean, any character that has their mother's surname means they come from a broken home. It means they come from a childhood that was abusive and traumatic. At the end of the day, people can be raised by single mothers without undergoing intense trauma, you know. The assumption that single mothers are somehow a worse parenting unit than a heterosexual couple is incredibly misogynistic and outdated. And also, like, yeah, the idea that women should have to take their men's surnames when they get married is something that should be questioned. Some people are like, oh, it's just tradition. It's not just tradition. It's a tradition rooted in the fact that your father used to have to pay a man to marry you because women were just property that men used to climb up the social ladder. It's something that needs to be questioned. And you'd think if they've decided to erase all inequality that maybe they would have discussions on this. But no. You guys didn't think I could make a 100 video about talking about shipping, did you? Like, of course I'm going to talk about shipping. I've been trying to be on the fence, because at the end of the day I'm bisexual. I don't like choosing. I like Clexa and I like Belloc. But I'm going to break down why I like each ship and how they were wronged. Is that fair? Is that fair? Please don't come for me. It's really annoying when you get into your childish ship wars. As I have stressed several times throughout this video, it's an unspoken YA rule that the love story is star-crossed levels. Lovers, not levels. And at first glance, Belloc fits this bill perfectly. A poor guy and a posh girl. Great. He makes her more badass and she makes him more caring. They bring out the best in each other. Everyone in my house right now has a fucking cold and it's driving me insane because I refuse to catch a cold. Even if you aren't watching with shipper goggles, the tropes are pretty clear. They go from enemies to reluctant allies to friends to friends. In season 1, Bellamy and Clark unite to the 100 to fight together against the Grounders. In season 2, it is Bellamy and Clark who manage to free the 100 from the Mountain Men. Season 3 is all about the conflict that happens after this, where Clark shirks her responsibilities and Bellamy feels like he's left to pick up the pieces of what has happened since. Plus Bellamy is like, you know, he's very sad, so he decides to get over all the war crimes he committed in season 2 by committing more war crimes in season 3. You know, there's nothing makes you feel better about committing a few war crimes by committing a few more. I think George Bush said that once. Like, the season 3 ends with Abby saying that Bellamy is the most important person to Clark, and that means the baddies should target him first because she'll do anything for him. Like, you're telling me that's platonic? And then we have all the references to them being in love, like when Ali says that Bellamy always loved Clark more than his canonical girlfriend Gina. When Octavia says that he is, you know, killing her because he's trying to save a traitor that he loves. Octavia, the character that knows Bellamy best in the series, yep. By season 6, the only thing that is stopping Belloc get together is that they're, like, too busy. And Echo's still there, but that's, like... At the start of season 7, Bellamy suddenly disappears because the actor wanted time off. Freeze frame, rewind, we gotta talk about the behind the scenes drama. Eliza Taylor and Bob Morley suddenly eloped at some point when season 6 was airing, right? Nobody even knew they were dating. It was like, everybody's fanfic dreams come true. These two actors that have such great chemistry on screen suddenly realised they have great chemistry in real life. Even better, they had known each other before they started doing the 100. They had both been in Neighbours, for crying out loud. And before they started the show, they apparently had a pact with one another where they said, we're going to look after each other in this strange new American world. Perfect, right? Bob and Eliza later mentioned that they had suffered a miscarriage during the filming of season 6 and that it was quite traumatic for them. Eliza was meant to direct an episode that season, but she ended up pulling out because, you know, she was dealing with all the repercussions of this miscarriage. Bob, who had a history of mental health issues, appeared to take time off from the filming of season 7 to deal with the trauma of the miscarriage. And, you know, Jason Rothenberg apparently decided to respond to this by giving him an absolutely dogshit storyline and then killing him off. Like, yeah, well done, professional. Like, if you have, like, I don't know either of these men. I'm just saying, if you have a falling out with somebody you're working with, you don't then completely jeopardise that character just to get back at them. Like, going back to season 1 of Doctor Who, famously, Christopher Eccleston and Russ T Davies had a massive falling out, and that's why he ended up leaving after 1 season. Heartbreaking for me. But that was the perfect ending to that character, because they were behaving like professionals. Well, I don't know them personally, but the more professional than what has happened to him. It's also important that we discuss that during season 7, some allegations of verbal abuse came out against Bob Morley. Essentially, his former partner said that while they were together, he was cheating on her with Eliza and then gaslighting her and lying and saying that he hated her, and shouting at her and subjecting her to all sorts of horrible examples of emotional abuse. I mean, I must point out that Bob and Eliza both denied all this. They say that they got together after he and his former partner had broken up. However, I would also like to say that a lot of people don't really understand emotional abuse or verbal abuse. A lot of people think that abuse is just hitting your partner. Very few people even understand the meaning of the word gaslighting. It's become like a meme. At the end of the day, constantly shouting at somebody and then telling them that everything they think is untrue and that if they ever criticise you, they're actually the bad guy. It can really break down somebody's psyche. And a lot of people will do this and then claim that they did nothing wrong. So, I don't know the truth of the situation. Everyone is innocent until found guilty in a court of law and everything. I'm just saying, I think that there are a lot of people who engage in verbal and emotional abuse who do not consider themselves abusers. Back to the show, I think that Belloc are a great couple because honestly they have the most chemistry out of anyone in the show, and that includes Clexa. I love Clexa, I do. They don't have the same chemistry as Belloc. I'm sorry, they just don't, okay? It's just an opinion. Bellamy and Clark's relationship is, a good example of star-crossed lovers, and it's also a good example of a relationship between a man and a woman that is built on respect. You would think that in the 21st century we would never see a romantic relationship on the screen between anyone, especially a man and a woman, because of the long history of misogyny against women perpetrated by men, especially by male romantic partners, but unfortunately that's not the case. And so it's actually quite refreshing to see a teenager's show make it clear to young girls the most important thing your partner can do for you is to respect you. And Furthermore, when The 100 first came out, it was actually quite rare to see an interracial couple on television. I think that Bob Morley was actually the first South Asian lead male actor in a network TV show. Therefore, we have both real life barriers to Clark and Bellamy potentially getting together that the audience will understand, because there is prejudice against a white woman going out with a man of colour. And then there are also the in-universe prejudices of, within this insane class system they have, of Clark being a richer girl going out with a poorer guy would just be frowned upon. Clexa are an absolutely great couple, okay? I love the concept of them. If you're going to do star-crossed lovers in this world, the most obvious route to go through is to have a sky person go out with a grounder. And then once again we have the real-life parallel of a sky person and a grounder dating can be compared to the real-life discrimination that same-sex couples experience. I very much enjoyed how Clark coming out wasn't this big gotcha moment, Like, we don't really know that much about how Clark came to terms with her sexuality. But when Alexa kisses her, she's not surprised, she's not taken aback. For all we know, Clark always knew she was bisexual growing up. All too often on television, we see people learn they are bisexual in later life because somebody that is outwardly queer, will kiss them suddenly. I don't have a problem with these storylines. That is the experience of many people. I'm just saying, if you want to represent an entire community, you have to represent the diversity of the experiences within that community. As a bisexual woman myself, I knew that I was attracted to people of all genders before I kissed anyone. And it's nice to see that that's potentially the experience of this character on this teen TV show. I also love Clexa because they do a different thing to Belloc. If Bellamy provides Clark with an emotional foil, Lex provides her with an emotional foil. And the two of them manage to find this vulnerability. Lexa and Clark could end all the conflict by choosing love over violence. Then she got shot by a stray bullet, right after they had sex. No, this isn't 2002 and you're not watching a Joss Whedon show. They are using the same offensive stereotypes. Lexa does come back in various forms, but she's always essentially a robot. At the end of the show, Clark eventually goes into this sort of afterlife portal where she sees Lexa again. It's like, oh my god, Lexa, the love of my life. And then Lexa is like, yeah, I'm not her, I'm a robot version of her. And Clark is quite upset and distressed by this. But then she ends up going to this afterlife version of Earth. And Lexa comes back and it's like, oh, Lexa Endgame, fun! Until you actually think about it. You think about the fact that that's not Lexa. That's a robot version of a dead woman. Like, a better writer could write quite a, emotionally damning exploration of what it would be like to have your dead partner come back to life, but it's not quite them. By the way, Be Right Back by, it's a Black Mirror episode. It's streaming on Netflix right now. I'd probably give that a watch. Anyway, it's also just a cop-out because Clark has changed so much since Lexa died, and Lexa hasn't changed at all because she's just been in static. She hasn't had the opportunity to experience, I don't know, moving to a new planet, or all this nonsense cult shit they decided to bring up in your season 7. She is a robot version of somebody who is already stuck in time. And that is what we get for a potential endgame. I really feel that this was a poorly considered choice, that Jason Rothenberg just decided to shove into the finale because he went, you're not getting fucking Belloc, so if you're not going to get the best written couple, you can get a bastardized version of a lesbian character that I killed with an offensively anti-queer trope, and I'm not even going to consider how emotionally traumatizing it would be for Clark if a robot version of her ex-girlfriend came back. I just think that this writing shows a clear disdain for the audience and shows a clear lack of understanding for what an actual emotional response would really be. It really feels that he was like, I need to wrap the series up. I need to wrap this show up. I want to do a spin-off that nobody wants because I want to take out a second mortgage. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do an ending that shows complete lack of respect for the two biggest fan bases in my show, being Belloc and Clexa. I am going to do an ending which means neither of them get a happy ending. Because why? Well, because fuck the audience. I don't care about the audience. The audience are all stupid teenage girls. At the end of the day, I think there are 3 main reasons why the 100 went tits up. Number 1, I think Jason Rothenberg didn't plan past season 2, and therefore when he was introducing all these ridiculous in-world twists, it was like, is that necessary? Like, he clearly didn't have an ending in mind. Secondly, he had no respect for fans. He has pretty much publicly said that he doesn't care about shipping, and that he doesn't write for the fans. You don't have to write for the fans, you need to write well, and you need to write with a level of respect for the people that have paid your mortgage so far. And honestly, I don't think that he would be speaking with such utter disdain for the fans if his fans were not primarily young women. I think that's the case. I mean, I know that the Game of Thrones guys said something like, themes are for book reports. Okay, fair. Maybe writers are just arrogant bastards. But I really think gender informed this one, lads. And thirdly, I think he failed English Lit. I think he doesn't understand, how to do basic theme building, how to do basic analogies, and he didn't really listen to people who said, hey, if you're gonna do a very clear one-to-one analogy of a, emotive topic like the rights of Native Americans, maybe do it better. But then again, I've been speaking a lot like I know him. I don't know him. And I don't believe in ascribing intention to writers, as much as it seems like I've been lying about that. I am just theorising. These are from the text itself and what he has said publicly. This is the opinion I get of what the production behind this show was like. If you want a, cheesy show with some iconic ships in it, maybe with a supernatural element or something like that, The Good Place is widely available to stream on Netflix. Or if you want something like if you like something that is like actually good but also cheesy, like properly good, not like good place good, like good. Doctor Who. Streaming on BBC iPlayer only now, I think. You know, get a VPN and watch Doctor Who. Because honestly, like 95% of the storylines of the 100 have already been done, and they've been done better, and they've been done by Ross V. Davies. And that's it, I think. That's the conclusion of this incredibly long video that's probably going to absolutely kill me to edit. I had a migraine yesterday. I think I'm still having one today. And now I have to sit in front of a screen and edit this monster of a video because I hate myself. And then it's going to get like 4 views. But do you know what? If you're like, oh, I'm so glad you put all that effort into this video, and I'm so sorry you're having migraines, I really want to help. Do you know how you can help? You can subscribe, and you can comment about how amazing my makeup looks and how it's not at all just sort of sinking into my pores to the point where it's actually a little bit disgusting. And you can like it because you think I'm so charismatic and charming. And then you can share it with all your friends who also might have watched the 100, and we can all just sit here and revel in our collective trauma. Thank you very much for watching.